Good morning and welcome, David. It is a pleasure that has been postponed for quite a while because the first time we planned to have David Soskice with us was, I think, 2018. Then we tried again in 2019. Pandemic came, and now we are very happy. Usually, things that are launched for are even nicer to have. And David is a friend and is a scholar that I think has left an imprint in many places and in many disciplines. So it is a perfect fit for a Ciampi chair, given also the interest of the Institute to bridge disciplinary fields and try to overcome borders. David Soskice is a school professor and professor of political science and economics at the LSE since 2012. Now he's emeritus and is research director of the International Inequality Institute of the LSE until 2020. He taught macroeconomics and econometrics at Oxford, at University College at PZB, was PZB research director in Berlin, and this is where we met, and where I could also appreciate the capacity to bring macroeconomics, econometrics, economics in general, very much in contact with other disciplines. Something that economics, I think, was able to do very well in the past, and now has to do it, find a way to do it again. As most of you know, David is very well known in political science, sociology, law, and other disciplines for the work he made with Peter Hall on the very important book Varieties of Capitalism. But he has also written other books. Among the more recent one is the book with Niki Lesi, Leo Cheliotis, Sappho Xenakis, which was edited on tracing the relationship between inequality, crime, and punishment. And he wrote also other recent books like Democracy and Prosperity, published by Princeton Press, and Macroeconomics, a book that he wrote with Wendy Carlin. Economic advisors of Michael Mitchell, shadow employment ministers in the Blair in 1987-89. He was also a member of the Blair's policy unit in 97-98. And developed the 50% university participation target. He's a fellow of the British Academy, Politics, Economics and Management sections, a member of the Accademia Europea, a fellow of the American Academy of Art and Sciences, and the president of the European Political Science 2011 to 2014. Also, the presentations that he will give today is a presentations that is relevant for many disciplines, aiming and looking at the ways in which varieties of capitalism are changing themselves, following also technological transformation. But also how economics once again interacts with the politics and different traditions in different countries in comparative perspective. So David, thanks a lot for being here, and I give you the
Well, Donatella, thank you. Okay, is that good? I'll try not to move around too much. I was going to move right over to Donatella and thank her, but I'll resist doing that. But Mario and Donatella, thank you so much for. I'm so excited to be here, and lovely to see you, Philip. So the work here. I should also say I really like this interdisciplinary environment here. We've got a new director of the LSE, new president of the LSE, because the name had to change, because you couldn't just be a director. So we've got a new president of the LSE, and he's asking his question, comes to the LSE, and he looks around, and he, as it were, sort of susses very quickly that there are 3 important places in the LSE: the economics department, the government department, and the law department. So he says, well, I rather hope my mission will be an interdisciplinary mission. And everybody smiles very politely and gets back to doing the disciplines which they're working on. So this is marvelous that you have such an interdisciplinary institute as you do, and I'm very, very happy to be here. Now, what I want to talk about is really work which Torben Iversen and I have been doing, which springs from, I mean, originally was in this book which we wrote called Democracy and Prosperity, which was written in a slightly provocative vein. Certainly, if I remember, it provoked you, Philippe, on one occasion. And what I'm trying to do here now is to extend it, but to ask really, what is it which is happening, which is going so terribly wrong at the same time at the moment? And I'm sort of dividing the lecture up into 2 parts, of which the first part is going to be looking at the real transformation which I think has happened in advanced capitalism over a very recent period of time, over the last 10, 12, 15 years or so. Not at all a reversion to neoliberalism, but nor a reversion to the role of the state. But a big change has taken place, a very big change, a dramatic change has taken place. And I want to spend the first half of the talk on how we see that as having developed. And what we argue is, we look at a whole number of advanced economies. I mean, I'm afraid I haven't really, because I always regard Italy as such a marvelously, delightfully seductive and entangling mess of a country. I haven't really got deeply into Italy, apart from Bologna, actually. But in the countries which we've looked at, what has happened has been that successful cities, what are often called in the innovation literature, metro city clusters, have developed. So in the United States, to take an obvious example, let's say Silicon Valley, Boston, New York, Seattle, and so on, or Stockholm in Sweden, the sort of area between Denmark and Sweden, London actually. The UK, by the way, is collapsing, but London is working very well, more or less. So when we look at countries we see these very successful innovation-intensive cities, or high-value-added intensive cities, graduate-intensive as well, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, there's all the rest, the smaller cities, the towns, what the Americans, I think, call exurbs, rural areas, so on. And what you see is a deep polarization of the advanced societies which we look at between these relatively successful graduate-intensive, innovation-oriented, high value-added areas actually happen to be not right-wing politically, but really middle of the road or left of center and cosmopolitan and so on. And these other areas, and we see this what we call a educational, locational, and political polarization of advanced societies at the moment. And we then see we can then work a lot of the actual behavioral politics are done on this, showing how this is very associated with the rise of populism. And in fact, Peter Hall has been writing some marvelous things with Noam Gidron on looking at the role of loss of status, and this interesting fact that the loss of status is white and male, and in any case leads to this sort of almost rupture of how societies work. And I want to go on from that to say, when we look at the national governments in advanced countries, we see that they're largely in a terrible mess. A very good example, Israel is one of the countries which we were looking at, actually, I mean, needless to say, before the latest stuff happened, but we see the Israeli government is in a spectacular mess as a result of this populism versus whatever. If we look at France, we have Marine Le Pen had 40% of the vote last time. If we so the UK, as you all know, has been in pretty much chaos politically at the national level since 2013 on, and of course America is the absolute classic case of a totally gridlocked national level government, which has causing, as we know, chaos. But then we started looking, and this will be, as it were, the starting off point for I hope a sort of general discussion. Then we started looking at the metro city governments, and there the situation is almost the inverse to the national level. The city governments have far more coherent government. They are growing in power, and they embody coalitions between the, as it were, the relatively graduate intensive but not completely, but educated workforces in these metro cities, and the companies which are working in these areas. So you have a coalition which is very much centrist or slightly left of center in these areas. And these are all the people we like, I'm afraid. We're cosmopolitan. We value education highly. We value universities at the center of these places. And that seems a very fascinating point, that what's going on is actually a locational splitting of the political system. So rather than the political system being in chaos, it's actually the national level is in chaos, but the successful cities have been able to put together much more powerful city administrations based on this sort of coalition than in the past. Now, it's very interesting, of course, that these successful cities, actually, when you look at the statistics, they are actually quite unequal. And they're quite unequal because into these successful cities, there is a whole less skilled or less educated, not always a less educated, workforce of people working in the lower level skills services. And therefore, there's a very fascinating, you see this in the United States, differences in the United States, very fascinating coalitions which are developing, which are not totally stable, but quite interesting between lower level workers and the higher level workers and what the city wants to make the thing all work out. So I could probably stop the lecture now, but I'm not. It'd be rather cheap to do that. So I think I can see I've got a sort of implicit contract hanging over me, which needs to be fulfilled. Anyway, that's how roughly I want to argue it, and I want to really pose this question, which I hope we did, but it's really opening this question up. Where do we go from here? What are the dynamic changes which are available, and so on and so forth. Let me start off anyway with these what I'll call successful metro city clusters. It's a sort of term which is used not wholly successfully. Now, I've written this from a perspective of two, I would say, subdisciplines. One is the comparative political economy of advanced economies. Actually, I'm well aware from your stuff, Donatella, how much of this actually has echoes and very interesting questions. Exactly why are there so many interrelationships between things? But nonetheless, I'm sort of writing it to, if one talks things in terms of audiences. One big audience. Well, that sounds rather boastful. Stop that. Sorry, that's what one of my grandchildren tells me. I'm being boastful, and I need to stop being boastful. So there we are. The audience I'm aiming for really is a sort of advanced comparative political economy of the advanced economies. But what we've been doing in the last few years in the LSE has been very much tying our research together with the economic geography part of the geography department, and in particular there's a very well-known geographer called Michael Storper, and Michael Storper he pushes things a lot. So we have been doing quite a lot of work together, and this particular juncture between comparative political economy and economic geography turns out to be a very fruitful area to work in. We're beginning to bring the law into it because the law seems another area which we should be bringing more into things, but that's the sort of basic disciplinary intersection or subdisciplinary intersection which I'm working in. And the very interesting fact is, if you look at political science, it's very interesting how very little work has been done on the great technological changes which have been taking place in the recent past. So this is really a little bit of a plaidoyer for paying a lot more attention to technological change, technological disruptions, breakthroughs, and so on, and the role of politics. So it's saying there'll be a huge amount of work has obviously been done on populism, and that's very much we very much draw on. there's been some work done recently in political science on macroeconomics, and I gather Lucio Beccaro was here recently, and his work is very interesting, although I disagree with it actually. And if I was to go on for 2 hours instead of, don't worry, if I then I would have gone on to the macroeconomics aspects of this, because obviously it's hugely integrated with how one should be thinking about growth theory. And a little plug, Wendy, Carlo and I've got a new book on macroeconomics where we do quite a lot of this, coming out from OUP, hopefully this month, but they haven't actually seen anything physical, which is called Macroeconomics, Institutions, Instability and Inequality. So inequality very much right up there in the so let me talk a little bit about, first of all, about what we'll call the metro city, the transformation of advanced capitalism. Exactly what are the ways we should look at it? And I'm arguing that we're arguing that there are 4 mutually reinforcing things going on. So I read last night. I read a marvelous paper which Mario has just written, where he looks at these similar reinforcing factors for good outcomes and reinforcing factors for bad outcomes at the same time. And I very much want to engage him with this during the time which I'm here. Here are the 4 mutually reinforcing ways. By the way, you should be able to get a copy of the. I've sort of done a rough draft, so you can get a copy of that. And I've also included a much longer chapter on innovation, growth, and political economy from this book by Wendy in it as well. The 4 factors. What are the 4 factors? Well, the first factor is this technological revolution, which we're going through at the moment. And let me emphasize directly that this is not precisely because all these things tie together. I am not a technological determinist in my views. This is not, as economists used to say, manna from heaven. What we're seeing, and I want to try and bring out why this technological revolution is different, very different to, that's to say, the revolution of literally the past 15 years or so is very different to the digital revolution of the last third of the 20th century. It's largely a communicating software systems revolution. This revolution is about really complex software. It's largely American initiated, and if I have the chart, I've sent around quite a big chunk about how to analyze what's going on in America at the moment. In fact, I wrote a chapter called The American Knowledge Economy in this really marvelous edited volume by Jacob Hacker, Alexander Hertel, Paul Pearson, and Kathy Thielen, where Paul Pearson was always telling me, David, I think you're so marvelous, but could you just make it a little bit more left-wing, do you think? Could you not see those capitalists as being a bit worse than you're paying? Anyway, so I put the opprint for that in the thing I've sent round as well. But this is largely Mario did a rather marvelous flip of his hand, which I think had a 0 and an M, which means suggested to me there was a mins was at the end of this. Want to do it again? Here's a funny story. Now, think of this as an interlude break. When I was in Berlin, a very famous French sociologist, the most famous French sociologist, whose name begins with capital B, came to do a presentation of the Wissenschaftszentrum. And everybody was done in a very German way, so there was as it were, a raised bit at the front, and chairs around the raised bit, and those were all for powerful German professors. So you had sort of about 30 powerful professors from Germany were sitting. I hope that doesn't count as in the LSE, by the way. Now I have to be really careful about the language which I use. So can I just say that I was in no way saying anything disparaging at all about Germans, who I regard as a very upstanding and important race of people. Okay. These big German professors all sitting around the end of the room, and Bourdieu comes in, and there's a big sign there saying no smoking. Bourdieu comes in, and they're all wearing ties. This is quite a long time ago. Bourdieu is not wearing a tie, just wearing a blue shirt, jeans. Comes in, and he sits on just doesn't sit in the chair, sits on the edge of the table. This is not usual sort of stuff. And then he says, out of the Time story, then he says, as you know, I was going to talk about whatever it was. On the plane coming over here, I thought I'd really like to talk about X. Now, if I may say so, at that stage in Germany, changing plans at the last moment was something you didn't do. So he then says, and the only problem is, it's really going to take me 2 hours or so to set this out. So I'm sorry about that, but that'll mean we'll end it. And you could see panic was ensuing. People getting out their watches, they're getting out their phones and phoning up to say, so I'm not going to alarm you by going on for more than 10 minutes or so. No. But it was such, you weren't there.
I
no.
can
Imagine. What are these 4 interrelating things? So the first thing is, as I was saying, was this technological revolution, which is often called the second digital revolution, or the systemic software revolution. So at its core are complex platform integrating communicating software systems which require hugely powerful computing and transmission capacities, which were being developed right through this time, huge amount of money being poured into that. And innovation-driven companies with sophisticated workforces. So with this have come radical new complementary technologies. Wi-Fi and broadband, actually mobile device, didn't really start until the early 21st century, believe it or not. iPhone doesn't come in until 2008 or 2009, the first one. But then Web 2 and Web 3. So Web 3 is blockchain and completely decentralized systems on the internet. Then comes, much more recently, Web 4 with augmented reality and virtual reality. the whole development of sensor technologies, extraordinary development of sensor technologies, nanotechnology and then robotics, which is using all this stuff, and more recently, but hugely influentially, cloud and edge computing. So, and then obviously most recently, all the AI developments, but it's all literally in the last decade, AI, industry fear, large language models, which are being so much used at the moment, a bit earlier, machine learning and deep learning, etc. And then on top of all that, there's the whole synthetic biology revolution of genetic manipulation, CRISPR, and latest of all, this incredible ability to model protein folds, which is going to really change a lot of things. So there's been this huge technological revolution going on but literally past 13 years, the importance. Now, the second element of that, and this is the second of the four things, is, and this is actually again at the heart of what we might call advanced innovative capitalism. The innovations based on these things and these innovations themselves have depended on advanced companies being organized in a really different way than the past, highly flat, lots of project groups, people working in project groups, virtually no explicit contracts. You can't have explicit contracts in a world like this because you can't monitor people in an explicit way or anything like that. So you're now in this world which essentially relies on pretty highly educated workforces in the workforce. Mainly graduate intensive, not wholly graduates, but mainly graduate intensive, and innovation-driven managers and owners. And there are also a huge number of qualifications about how this works in different places. US, obviously, US, UK, totally different to what goes on in Germany and Sweden, where we've also been working a lot. So a very interesting question then is, what are the institutions which relate to this? So how do you get institutions which represent employees, these employees, effectively? Because these employees have got to be highly cooperative. And you can't do that mechanically. So in Germany, you have increasingly powerful works councils. And what's interesting about the role of unions in Germany, just very quickly, is that the National IG Metall is developing into a really high-level consultancy organization, helping the works councils to negotiate with managers in this area. You have innovation-driven owners in Germany. These are Stiftungen and so on, who are just concerned about the ongoing future of the company, and therefore they have to be innovative nowadays to survive. You have to be highly innovative, and that's what they do. In Sweden, it works quite differently via these huge financial empires, the Wallenberg Empire, Industrivärden, Handelsbanken, and so on. So that's the second element, that the actual way companies are run has become wholly different. This is the new face of capitalism, and this is sort of behind what I'm talking about political coalitions. Thirdly, all this has taken place in these relatively small number of metro city clusters. So it's quite, if you look at a map of Germany, of the United States, it's quite extraordinary that all this is going on all this innovation, everything else is going on in really a relative number of these hugely high intensity places Manhattan actually better than New York. So that's the third element of all this. Everything is working through these metro cities. But let me just put in one quick one sort of brackets very quickly in there. A lot of these companies have platforms. The people who work at the end of the platforms, they're working Uber drivers, they're working in a lot of different places, and they're not typically high level. I mean, some of them are, but in general, they work under difficult situations. And that's, again, of course, Kathy said she's going to come here, and that's what Kathy's working on very much at the moment. And finally, the fourth thing is, this has gone with a big increase in graduate participation in higher education. And this is really interesting. So if you go back to 2000, roughly 25% of the sort of workforce up to the age of 40, let's say, were from 25 to 40 were graduates. And that's now gone up to between 2000 and 2020 to sort of 50%, that sort of 50% with a gender edge to a good gender edge to it. Now, what's really interesting is if you go back to 2000, you go back to the 90s and 2000s, and you look at how graduates were employed and where they were employed, a very large proportion of that 25% were doctors, nurses, secondary school teachers, huge number of secondary school teachers, lawyers, blah, 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 all those sorts of, but a whole range of those sort of local professional people. And they lived everywhere. So this was not a metro city world at all. Fast forward to 2020, and you find these extra, I mean, all those people are still there because they have to be, but you find this extra 20% or so. These are the people who have now gone into the successful, been pulled into these successful metro cities. So all those four things have exactly mutually reinforced each other. And when you look at the data actually on these, they literally co-move. So that's here ends the first part of the lecture. Then you now look at what the effect is on advanced societies, and you have this massive polarization of advanced societies, locationally, educationally key, but also politically. And the political one is what I started off by talking about, which is we sort of have this paradox, well, how can you have so much innovation, successful innovation going on in the last 10 years when political systems seem to be tearing themselves in pieces? Answer, the city governments, the metro city governments, are the places you really have to look for. They're different, of course, and there are different constitutional aspects to all of them. But these are the places which are really understanding. They have to take care of things now. So that's the, well, why don't I stop there now so we have time to talk? And apologies if I went on too long.
Thank you very much. It's a very stimulating presentations that I think will open debates on the bridging of this new work you presented with your old work on varieties of capitalism and how potentially these metro cities developed differently or equally in different varieties of capitalism itself, but also Roccan's concept of center periphery, Saskia Sassen's concept of global city, which can well, but this I leave for later on. We have two discussants. Do you have a preference where to go? alphabetically, we go. Guglielmo Meardi, please.
Thank you, Donatella, and thank you, David. It's lovely to see you here after this long wait due to a turbulence between in the world and between the UK and Europe, which I had to overcome. Now, like everybody who started studying economy and society in the last 25, 30 years, in a way, my thinking, my intellectual growth, and so on, has been somehow marked by David's contribution to the field. And one great thing of David Soskice, of course, is to look at the big issues and often anticipate what the debate is. And the big question basically is where capitalism is going, or better, where capitalisms are going, whether it is about globalization, whether it is about democracy, whether it is about technology, digitalization, artificial intelligence. So that's all is brilliant, and I'm looking forward to this new book. I had very much appreciated the previous one. It's also a bit difficult to follow everything. It's the second time I'm the discussant of David, and telling somebody you have to discuss David Soskice is a bit like telling a defender in football, where you have to man Mark Messi, good luck. Where is he going? What he's going to do? We don't know. We'll see. So I try to follow a bit of the main points that I see in his current work and in the suggestions he gave during this Ciampi lecture. Well, one first remark is that, in a way, in comparison with the classic varieties of capitalism work, it's quite clear that the state is coming back as a very important area of reflection. The main institutions in a variety of capitalism schemes were born from the corporation, from dilemmas that the corporations had, and had to solve these problems, and therefore they built institution, but they were all in a way from the bottom. None of them required too much the state. All of them could be taught without thinking too much about the state. But since then, clearly that has become important. And here, the distinction between, for instance, the UK and the United States in their institution, how to deal with regulations, the role of the courts, the centralization of bureaucracies, state bureaucracies against the US that doesn't have it. That becomes very important. One question which comes up then is, in particular in the UK, if there is a decline in the capacity to innovate and to manage the innovation, is why all these feedback mechanisms and complementarities between institutions, which should, in a way, help a system, at least a system which is already developed, to keep its equilibrium and to solve every problem without undermining its own foundation. Why it seems that it's not working that much anymore, and the polarization of politics in the US is the main example. Getting now on the main specific arguments. Here there is a very interesting attention by David on the geography of innovation and its social and political consequences for democracies, for regulations, for types of capitalism. And this is something which was already important, but I don't think it was still fully developed in the previous book about democracy and prosperity, which dealt in particular with whether populism was a temporary illness or was it really a disaster. And it was a very optimistic book, which was something we really needed, after Trump and Brexit and so on. So psychologically, it was very welcome in terms of therapy. But are things going that well? One problem exactly of the geography of innovation, which is where David is putting most of his effort, him and his colleagues, but how to understand the implications, socioeconomic implications. One of the main problems, I think, is that whereas in 2019, that was the book, the argument was very much on the medium voter, and the optimism came from that. The medium voter is interested in a good economy. The medium voter has an interest in productivity and the quality of work and the quality of the economy going ahead. So even if there are populists, nutters coming up and then, more or less, always over time, democracy specifically democracy is the best thing for capitalism, because there may be some extreme on either corner, but the median voter will be interested in good management and good economy. And that was somehow convincing on one level, but exactly the geography of innovation, the fact that those who are interested in innovation, in the quality of work and the quality of production are so geographically concentrated, means that the median constituencies in political systems like the United States one or like the European Union one are not the same as the median voter. The median voter may be reasonably well educated, quite rational, and quite open-minded. But what really matters to win the American elections is not the median voter. For instance, Hillary Clinton had won the elections in terms of popular vote. It's to get the median voter of Michigan, for instance. And in Europe obviously is very different. It's much less democratic in a way, the European Union. But if you look at how majority works and so on, it doesn't matter that, yes, probably the median voter in Europe is quite well educated and open-minded and looking at the future in a hopeful way. Really, the median states in Europe are different ones. If you want to achieve the majority, you cannot certainly do it on the basis of the voters of the Netherlands, Finland, and Denmark. If you look at the digitalization index by the European Union that combines skills and innovation and so on and so forth, the median countries in the European Union are Greece, Portugal, and Slovakia. Okay, nice countries which have some excellence. They are better than Italy. Italy is well below the European Union average. But whereas you can think that European Union governance can do away from the very, very last country, which are Romania and Bulgaria, you cannot propose something effectively in the economic and social management of Europe without having on your side the median voters of places like Greece, Portugal, and Slovakia, which quite recently has voted for a populist government. So, what are then the implications? The implications are very, very important. Here, one is about specifically the relations between different social strata. How can we try to combine what is happening in the global cities, which somehow good, and we have good mayors and so on, and what happens in the polity as large, which is not going that well. That is a big problem in comparison to the previous, with 1 century ago, if we think about industrialization. It was combined with a big political cleavage between country and city, but politically there were a lot of ways to build that bridge. I mean, think about the communist movement and their symbol, okay? That is, the sickle and the hammer, and the idea that, workers in the countryside and in the city more or less, have the same interests. Culturally, they were very different already. But socially, politically, the divide was much easier to bridge. Now, if we see election after election, that is much more difficult. And that point, which David takes from Gideon and Peter Hall, which I think is a very provocative one, a very interesting one. For those here, we have quite a lot of people studying the far right's populism and reactions at different levels. The status anxiety of the losers of globalization, and the fact that they are concentrated, there's specifically, but whether in America or in Europe, male, non-university educated people is particularly interesting, because that is really the gap, the political gap that needs to be bridged. The current equivalent of the peasant factory worker gap that had to be bridged, and was bridged in many ways by the political forces of industrial society, is the one that needs now to be bridged. In particular, is the bridge between the male. Manual or non-manual is in a way less relevant. Non-highly educated worker and the female highly educated worker. That is where really the tension is. And the provocative argument by Gideon and Hall, which is a bit hidden, initially they had put it very, very high because it was so provocative and everybody in the university got upset. Now it's quite hidden in their work. But their argument is that among various factors that explain the rise of populism is the fact that more people go to university. It's very counterintuitive because one thinks, oh, if more people go to university, we'll be more clever and therefore less populist. No, the more people go to university, the more the median job is the job of a female, newly educated, graduated worker. And that is, in terms of social status, the biggest insult for a manual, manual or non-manual, but especially male, non-highly educated worker, which explains why the countries where higher education has grown very fast are the countries where populism has grown the fastest. United States, United Kingdom, Poland. So that is the big divide. And I wonder, whether we should think more about exactly how to bridge, in terms of political organization, political discourse, and so on, the interest of especially the new female highly educated workforce and the male non-highly educated workforce. I think that much less is done than what is needed. More on the political institution side, there is the city government part, and that is very highly relevant for us in Italy. I don't know how much. David is a very keen observer of Italy. I don't know whether he's following the latest mess with various proposals of automated, differentiated autonomy for cities, regions, and whatever what, which is supported by some of the right and some of the left. And certainly in Italy, we have examples of what you say. The big city that has elected very progressive mayors. We've seen in London, Zurich, Paris, Madrid, even worse in Budapest in comparison to the rest of the country, and Milan 10 years ago also elected a relatively far left mayor. How can that be combined with institutions that are stable also at the national level? Is the big problem that we see in Italy. Wonder whether David has an idea about how, by looking at the experience of London versus the rest of the UK, is Keir Starmer managing to do that? Putting together what seem to be incompatible, basically two different countries, or what else can be done. Myself, as a labor sociologist, rather, so I'm commenting on this as an observer rather than really an expert. I see some a parallel between what is happening in the city, that is this progressive, highly efficient, contemporary cities where there are a lot of progressive policies, but always policies in the interest of big corporations, because they live out of the corporations. You may have a very far left mayor at least comparatively far left mayor in Paris or in London with Livingstone or Pisapia in Milan and so on and so forth, but they will never touch the interest of the corporations. They will do some progressive policies in the cultural side, but not on that, because they live out of the corporations. In a way, we see a parallel also in the value chains. So with the phenomenon so-called of woke capitalism, some corporations clearly can't believe their luck that they found cost-free ways to show they are socially responsible by changing pronouns to people. And now they're socially responsible, they're progressive, and everybody should work there and be happy. But if you just go one or two steps down the value chain, you find the worst racist ways of segmented workers, controlling workers, violent, racist, sexist, segregation and inequality. Somehow it's a comparison. I see the parallel with what happens at geographic level. You can have a very good politically correct mayor, but the supply comes from somewhere just outside the city border, outside the country border, with very different conditions. I have a few minutes more, no? Because so I will also say something about varieties of capitalism back, yeah? If David allows me, because maybe it's tries not to speak only about that. It seems to me, and it was quite clear in this book, that paradoxically, even if 25 years ago the future of capitalism was to focus on your own comparative advantage, institutional comparative advantage in particular, and for the Americans should be good at the radical innovation, and Europe should be good at, Germany in particular should be good at the gradual innovation. Now the problems that David is discussing with radical innovation even within the United States suggests that this kind of radical innovations now, in comparison to 20, 30 years ago, actually require some elements of coordinated capitalism. This was already a bit clear here. You know, countries with good vocational training, they are better exactly at avoiding this big status gap between the university graduated and those who don't go into university. If you have very good middle education, which is, you know, either the low-level university or very good vocational schools, then you can avoid this big gap that happens in liberal countries. Those who go to university, they think in one way, they vote in one way. Everybody else feel very much undermined in their social status. So that was already a big change. But if we start looking now at the topic of his recent research on digitalization, that's even more true, probably even within production. And there are people at the Scope Center, for instance, on skills in the UK. They compared the implementation at work of digital technologies in Scandinavia and in Britain. And although in Britain there is a bit more innovation, so they're a bit faster in innovations, they are slower in implementing and diffusing the innovation across the working processes. In Scandinavia, it may take a little bit more time, but eventually they manage, thanks to higher trust, consultation, broader level of knowledge and so on, to have an implementation of new technologies across the progression system, across the different levels of the workforce. That is very interesting because for a labor sociologist like me, because in the previous period, let's say during industrialization, one could expect that the liberal market economies could manage the labor problem in their own way. You know, they didn't have a socialist revolution after all. They managed to keep workers' consent through high wages, that's a fact, and corporate welfare for the big corporation in America. That was very important to keep employees and have the employees very proud of working for Ford or whatever, for General Motors and so on, without having to give them too many rights in terms of consultation, information, negotiation, and so on, even at the peak of Roosevelt, you know, not at the level of Europe, and without making work interesting, okay? That was very important at the time. So they managed to keep work boring by paying workers well, and also, well, there will be also the gender side, you know, you could tell workers to work hard so long, you know, they were male workers who could then exploit their wives in the house. That is an additional aspect. Now it is much more difficult because I don't think you can have a successful implementation of artificial intelligence by paying people or offering corporate welfare, which, by the way, becomes more and more difficult because companies are smaller and smaller. So you can't have the efficient corporate welfare that you could have at the time of Ford or General Motors. You need to offer workers something interesting to do. You need to offer workers a voice on what they do. There is a very recent book by Roots Dukes and Wolfgang Streeck, Democracy at Work, which deals exactly on the labor aspect of digitalization, and their conclusion is exactly that. The main point, what is really needed, the first thing, not the only thing, but the first necessary thing you need is a new version of information consultation and organization rights for workers. Otherwise, the new form of digitalization and so on do not function. That's paradoxically is a bigger challenge to liberal market economies than the wage issue was. Paying workers a bit more, we can do it. It's a cost. We prefer not to do it, but if we have to do it, that's fine. But changing the way companies are run and changing the content of work is a much more difficult.
Thank you very much. And Mario Pianta.
Thank you very much, David, for this Ciampi lecture, which is a long-awaited opportunity to integrate our own research trajectories. And I think it's very important here to be aware of how important it is to bring in transformation on the supply side of the economy, with the technology in particular, in the organization of work and the model of business organization, together with the demand side of the expansion of the economy, and the political processes that are reflected. Here I would point to a few points building on your paper, which is very stimulating in the direction it moves. In the technological revolution, as a matter of fact, we have, I would think that digital platforms are something different, are not just software. In terms of the ability they have to translate knowledge in technology into global networks, controlling overall activities very far from technology, think of Amazon and delivery workers. They are really creating a new model which integrates technology, production, distribution, and labor, which is largely beyond the scale of the state as a regulator. So while in the previous model, the importance of the state that you rightly emphasize was effective in setting the rules, wages, contracts, markets, competition, and so on, digital platforms are really able to jump these, and we have a PhD student studying how they jump the responsibility to pay taxes too. Okay, and which is a fundamental duty of corporations. So in a way, digital platforms are able to escape some of the structural conditions which were typical of the previous model of division of labor and the complementarity between state and business. Moreover, ICT and the digital economy has a very strong financial dimension. Some firms do not earn profits; they only increase the stock market valuation. So in this case, it becomes very difficult to tax them, for instance, or to understand where the benefits go. And of course, stock market benefits go mainly in the center of the world economy, in Wall Street, rather than distribute across countries and even less distributed across territories. So the financial, the importance of the financial dimension, again, which is deterritorialized, breaks again the structural connection between territories. As a matter of fact, some of your data on the productivity growth of large cities can be a bit biased by the fact that the average income includes financial income, which is, of course, is very high in places like New York or London and so on. So I think you have to be a bit careful to understand what is really rooted into cities' economies and what is dematerialized and moves beyond that. So in general, a key issue behind the impoverishment of the middle classes, the loss of jobs, and so on, is the inability of the new high-tech digital technology economy to create a distributional mechanism which is less unequal, less biased towards the top 5%, less biased towards wealth, less biased towards the global high earners. And this is a job for politicians, it's a job for the domestic political processes, but it is remarkable that was basically given up by most political processes, at least in Europe. So I would like to hear what you think about this. You emphasize the issue of education. Here we have a number of paradoxes. First of all, Italy has the lowest level of people with university education in the labor force in Europe. So, and Europe includes places like Milan or Bologna, which are well integrated in your model. No? They are successful metro cities in this sense. So why Italy, but not just Italy, has so little attention to university education, if university education is a key driver of what you're saying? But it's not just Italy. If this is so important, why in the US which has a successful increase of university-educated labor force, a major financial problem has to do with the student debt. So there has been no institutional way of providing resources for bringing the country in the direction you are identifying. Basically, a lot of analysts suggest that the next financial crisis may be driven by this type of vulnerability. So if this is true, is very important. Why the systems, the institution, the political process do not pay enough attention to this dimension. On the territorial concentration, I was in this conference on Italian territorial divides in Bari last month, and there was a very interesting worrying picture of how Italian territorial divides are not at all anymore north-south. We have been experiencing the loss of the central Italian region. Marche and Umbria are joining back the south as less developed region, obtaining EU compensation funds. And they've thought of themselves as being advanced. The Marche has the highest share of manufacturing labor force in Europe. So we have a combination of late industrialization and massive deindustrialization, which is really breaking down the social identity of this region. And this region, of course, went to vote for the five-star first and then for the far right in the last elections. So you have a very clear connection between impoverishment and marginalization at the territorial level with populism and voting for the right. But these people on the Adriatic side of Italy were saying, well, the problem is that the Adriatic connection has collapsed, and what is left is Alta Velocità, the connection of a fast train. And as a matter of fact, all the center-left administrations in Italy are Milan, Bologna, Florence, Rome, and Naples. And in a way, the corridor of the high velocity, which is consistent with your argument, is what keeps together the small Italian version of your story, the sort of opportunity for jobs for highly skilled, educated people, a lot of female progressive social identities, and so on. So this is an interesting, but again, Italy, in your perspective, is a highly fragmented and dangerous. Finally, it would be interesting to have your overall perspective on the political, where are we going in terms of political alignments, because with the Italian government of Giorgia Meloni and the possibility of a strengthening of the French far right in the coming years with the confusion within the camp of Macron. We were discussing this with Francesco Saraceno last week. So are you still as optimistic as you were in that book, or less so?
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask David if he wants to respond to all these suggestions and points.
Yes, at some point, but maybe.
You want to open the floor,
Maybe
Philip? There are people online.
But Mario, the answer to your last question is, no, I'm not. It was wrong. You're optimist, absolutely, no question. Mea culpa.
Schmidt?
Okay, it comes as no surprise to me to discover that we've been thinking along similar lines, but as is, I guess, appropriate given the interdisciplinary nature of our explorations. I start from a different point of view, but I think we're ending up very similarly. I look at two things that have been changing. First is what I call the extractive capacity of the state. And other one is the capacity for self-organization of citizens or subjects or whatever they are, depending on the type of regime, obviously. Now, what ties them together and what ties everything you said together, at least in my approach, is finance capitalism. Impact that finance capitalism has had upon the extraction capacity of the state. Now, as you point out, if you live in one of these privileged cities, that's one of them. It's not prototype of the whole bunch. They do very well because that's where these concentration and that's where they have the property and their banks and all of their houses and you can extract from them. So those cities actually have benefited a great deal as states, but in a sense, city-states, right? Whereas when you take it to the national or regional or larger scale, finance capitalism, so for me, you keep referring to technology. I agree. But what is important to me is who's using the technology, and that's where finance capitalism and the capacity to hide wealth. So inequality today is nowhere near as visible as it used to be. It is invisible, and many of these people have houses, who knows on what island, some, blah, blah, blah. So we get this immense quality, but it's not a life, so to speak, because the differences are electronically monitored and shuffled around from place to place. But that, of course, makes the extractive capacity. Second general observation, this all fits in rather well with what you're saying. It's just that I'm coming at it from a different angle, okay? And that is the capacity for self-organization. You mentioned it, you alluded to it. Of course, the enormous decline in the capacity for collective action of the working class. Enormous, unprecedented. Now, part of this, of course, has to do with the fact that in the combination of finance capitalism and the service economy, the units of production are either very well paid, or they are smaller and smaller units. The service economy, then, people work, and they work in rather individualized circumstances with relatively few people around them, so to speak. So all of the so-called Fordist, or all of the kinds of dynamics that took place in large factories with large numbers of people doing the same thing and being exploited, that is relatively rare, or it's assigned to China, Vietnam, or some other place, okay? So it seems to me that when you look at it from that perspective, so on the one hand, you have the extractive radical change, organization of social classes, professions, sectors of the economy, and finance. You don't need kind of things. They have their own networks, so to speak, that don't. So the bottom line is comfortable relationship. Mentioned it because it was based on magic formula. And that was in the post-World War II years. Increases in productivity would be covered by increases in real wages. So that meant a general, so there was a magic formula, so to speak. In social democratic, it was negotiated. This was, it worked out somewhat differently in more liberal systems, but Scandinavian, if you want to call it. Don't have, most workers do not work under capacity for collective action. That's my, so I come at it the same way, but from I start from a different
Philippe, so first of all, I should say, I guess I learnt my first
Okay,
my
sorry.
first political economy. When Colin Crouch explained to me about corporatism, maybe God 50 years ago. I can't believe it. How long ago it was, but it was a
15.
very long time ago. So
I hope to see Colin is somewhere in Umbria, I think, these
yeah,
days.
yeah,
So
that's
try to
exactly
visit
right.
him.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yes, yes.
Another two, just very quick comments. Of liberal democracy, and that is this so-called median voter theorem, right? Now, the median voter theorem depends upon two things. First, it works much better in a two-party system than in a multi-party system. So the dynamics are very different in a country like Italy or most of continental Europe than in the United States or Great Britain. So the median voter, who knows? I mean, and he's much more likely, she, to change parties, etc. So that's the first thing. The second argument, it depends on the assumption that on most of the issues that divide people, there is a normal distribution. And therefore, you will tend to have more people in the middle than you will have. What if the distribution looks like this? And that's the distribution that David was talking about. So it's the
Absolutely.
center, it's a classic one. It's a center periphery, which has long been, a major feature of all of our political systems, but it got less significant during a long period, and now it has vastly increased. The second, though, in a complement to the median vote, so presumed that those famous normal distributions overlap each other. And the code word here is cross-cutting cleavages. That's the central theory of a so-called pluralism in the American system. Normal distributions, but also people don't, they all disagree with each other, fine, but their disagreements don't accumulate. So, now, obviously, in the case of slavery, that didn't work too well, and they had to have a civil war to figure that out. I mean, and it still didn't work until the 1960s, for God's sake. But that's a different idea. But David is saying, what I'm saying is, what does that do? Annihilation of people on the ends, so to speak, more of a W than a C. Forcing each other. In the case of political parties. Political parties, that is the central weakness of present-day democracy. They simply don't function the way they're supposed to, according to these assumptions built into the model. Sorry.
Thank you. Sure.
Philippe, that's fantastic. I think I think your point about financial capital playing the role which it does play is absolutely spot on. It's located in
the
these
technology.
Yeah.
What counts is who's using the technology. For what purpose?
So, yeah, I want to really take that on board. I hadn't fully thought of it quite so powerfully as that. Very nice indeed. The second thing really on self-organization, what I'm very struck by actually in looking at all of these metro cities, I'll continue to use that term, is the extraordinarily powerful informal networks which actually sustain these cities. And in the sort of research we've done, the two sort of very broad informal networks. One is...
And then you don't even have to have ever seen the person you're networking with.
Well, no, you do. And one is skill occupational networks, and the other is social networks. And it's this combination of skill networks and social networks very important. Here is can I just come back to gender? Apart from, first of all, just simply saying the point that the female graduate workforce is absolutely key to understanding a huge number of things going on. Absolutely spot on, and I would have said that. Second thing is this. Here's this really fascinating point about assortative mating. So is assortative mating a well-known? Assortative mating means that university, if you go to university, you'll partner with someone who goes to university. Actually, you probably partner with someone at the same level of university, not just go to university. This has an extraordinary effect on the growth of metro cities, because if we both go to the same university, we partner, but you happen to work in, you're a lawyer, and I'm a finance person. We need to go to a city which is big enough to hold both of us. So you need to go to, so cities which have got multiple high-level career areas are going to be the cities which are really going to develop via this so-called, this slightly strange phrase, but assortative mating phrase, where you sort out your mate when in the appropriate way when you're at university or wherever it is. So that seems to me a really important point. That comes right back to what you were talking about and about self-organization. Now, dare I say it, I disagree with you about the democratic implications of this, because I see exactly your description as leading to this really strong democracy at the metro city level. But it's a democracy of the educated, and it's a democracy of the educated who work with in the innovative advanced capitalist sectors, and not the. I mean, then there's a huge range of other advanced capitalist sectors which are very far from innovative. So anyway.
I have some point. I don't see hand up, so I want to make them because they connect with what Philippe was saying. He mentioned center peripheries, and I think that when you distinguish the metro cities from the rest of the world, it is a bit too simplistic, because there is a lot of different things beyond the metro city. I think it's a critique that was also made to diversities of capitalism, but in this case, I think it would just add. And one of the critique is related exactly with what do you mean by periphery? Because it is clearly a center periphery type of conflicts, but there are many different groups that feel excluded, discriminated, unequally treated, and so on, in very different peripheries. So, for instance, you have immediately the banlieue type of peripheries, and this, I think, challenges the idea of democracy in the cities, because democracy is also something that involves those who have a stake in the issues. And if you look at the peripheries of the big cities, there you find the real losers that sometimes do not even appear in the political system because they're migrants, they don't have the right to vote, they don't have easy organizations, they are put aside. But you also have other peripheries. So you have, for instance, phenomenon like the yellow vest that describes people who live at a periphery that is no longer the one Rokan was thinking about, which is very much connected to the center, and sometimes also cleavages and claims and are related with the ways in which democracies at the metro, what you call democracy in metro cities, does not include those who are. Then there is another type of peripheries that is emerging very much also in environmental conflicts, and it is more the countryside. Think about the Sami struggles against the wind farms. It is a periphery that is called to pay for the energies and so on in the center. There is the peasants that Elmo was referring about, that have very different type of positions. And there is also a periphery that is calling for independence. So there is the revival of independent movement, autonomy. I think that probably thinking about what are the inequalities produced by metro cities, all these differences also in terms of conflict.
I think this is, oh, sorry. This is absolutely on the spot. And if you take, so if one takes Paris, you've got the banlieue who are just out of it, basically. They don't play a part. If you go to the work which Normale has done on ville périphérique, where the male white working class who got chucked out when the closures of the Renault factories, Boulogne-Billancourt, when they came right down, they go outside. They go 50 miles or so outside, and they furnish a lot of the protest movement, and they're also cut right out of the democracy of the metro city. Totally agree. And the rural areas are another areas. I mean, I think that was the point when I talked about. I mean, I was talking about democracy maybe in a wrong way. What I meant to say was, what are developing are areas of educated democracy, and completely agree with that. Part and parcel of that, and that was why I was talking about polarization being so sharp, was this way in which they could push out all these circles outside them and maintain themselves happily in the center. Anyway, that's what I meant. Yes, so I very much agree.
Thank you.
You. My name is Martin Fischer. I'm a PhD researcher at the European University Institute, and I was wondering, I mean, if I understood correctly, your book is from 2019, and what happened afterwards was, with the pandemic, for example, was a development which, in my opinion, also thanks to the digital revolution and this communication revolution, made this distinction between the metro cities and the countryside, for example, made it blurry again. Because what we saw then in the periphery was that thanks to the communication technology, it was possible to work remotely. So I wonder what the implications of this are. And I mean, honestly, it's also, again, a type of inequality, because it was the people that could afford going on the countryside to work remotely.
So this is obviously a super good question, this, and not the latest work which has been done in terms of looking at what is the new, we're clearly at a new equilibrium in terms of residents and so on in the city and the suburbs. The latest view seems to be that where one can see clear equilibria developing, there are people working at least 3 days a week, either 4 days a week or 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And if one then asks, so what's going to be the implication of that? Well, one implication is wealthy people are going to move out of literally the city centre. They're going to want to move somewhere where there's a little bit more green, a little bit more space. So both the office areas in the city and quite a lot of the shops in the city are going to reconvert to housing of some sort or other, but particularly housing for younger people. So what we see in London is that younger people are moving into, there's a lot of thought going into how you reconvert old banks or something like that. The LSE is actually trying to think of how do we make money out of this? We've got all this area. What can we do with this? Could we have very high level courses from Friday to Monday and turn parts of the LSE into really luxury hotels where executives could go for their 4-day intellectual injection? But that seems to be the way that's going, and that seems the interesting thing is that very few people literally go remote. There are some people who go remote, but very few people literally go remote properly. There's a bigger movement out into nice suburbs. And so actually my take on this in terms of if I'm forced to defend this democracy, it's absolutely fatal actually to say I think we've got democratic areas because I think that this, as it were, what I'll call educated democratic area, very frequently includes some of the suburbs, but not others of the suburbs. And in London, I could tell you exactly how that works, but also there's in all these places there's a gentrification process which is going on, which is extending the educated area, and then having very interesting effects on the people who live in the areas which are being gentrified, because some people get pushed out, but some people get really included in them. So that there's a great deal of interesting sort of demographic sociology going on there. Anyway, it's a good question.
Concept for you. Semi-periphery.
Very good.
Talking about.
Is that right? I'll say.
It goes to Manny Wallerstein.
Can you pass this?
Well, thank you very much to all of you. I'll try to put some order in my thoughts, which right now there is a big mess, but I will start from what you were saying about the interest of putting legal scholars within our interdisciplinary framework. And actually the book that Guglielmo cited before, the one by Ruud Dux and Wolfgang Streck, of course does this, Ruud Dux being a legal scholar. And what they argue, if I remember correctly, at the end of the book is they call somehow for a new economic citizenship that would somehow bring back the workers within the political regulation of companies, but also of the states, and overcome the problem of individualization of contracts and industrial citizenship. And of course, they call for this action for being proposed and being done at the political level, so that this is somehow is not a bottom-up approach, but is, on the contrary, something that should be done by political parties, etc. And so, and this is the problem of somehow economic democracy. And then also what Donatella mentioned before about migrants. I think this is also a thing that we should reflect upon, because we mentioned the center-periphery divide, the gender divide. I didn't see in the discussion the race divide or the migration divide. And for instance, if we look at the US, black ethnic minorities are almost excluded from the political systems, and they are a huge part of the working class. And the same happens in Europe, where migrants workers are actually one of the most active, maybe members of the workforce in terms of labor mobilization, especially in the logistics sector, etc. So those are workers which are excluded formal political participation, but they do participate in forms of political protest, as in the Ballieu or Black Lives Matter, etc., but also in labor protests. And so it's a problem of economic citizenship, a problem of political citizenship. But of course, let's say changes in political citizenship and economic citizenship have not happened in history only from the upper side. I mean, as if we take the example of Italy, we have had huge changes in economic citizenship after the autumn movement, and then of course these changes have allowed workers to mobilize more and more. But the first step has been works mobilization, or mobilization from below in any case. So it's just confused thoughts that I wanted you to just say a bit of word and not know if I've been clear. One last thing was about the country, the periphery, central periphery divide, and the problem of the countryside. Right now in Italy, the biggest factory is situated in a peripheric area, which is Melfi in Basilicata. It used to be Mirafiori in Turin, so in the center of the city. And so there has been also, as you say, gentrification of cities, but also working classization somehow of the countryside, with lots of manufacturing activities being displaced that used to be in city center or in city neighborhood being displaced in the countryside. The JKN case is the factory used to be in the Novi neighborhood. And so there's also a problem of class composition of countrysides that we should reflect upon.
Well, so that's really interesting, and I want to read Wolfgang's stuff, but what interests me is actually how you generate the political power to what are the political coalitions which enable you to actually create a citizenship of that sort. So while I very much go along with that, my question is, how do you do things like that politically? And I think that would be an argument with Wolfgang, which I'd be quite intrigued to have.
Just going back to the debate about democracy and this type of prosperity, because what you described in terms of the ways in which they stay connected reminded very much Floyd Hunter's book about elitism. So because it is Floyd Hunter who was the one that debated with Robert Dole, and Robert Dole was the promoters of the ideas of pluralism at the local level. Hunter spoke exactly about what you were saying in the city. The descriptions of these connections, tight connections between powerful elite that are powerful in several domains, exactly what would challenge the idea of a democracy there, because what Robert Dole described as democracy as a polyarchy is the divisions of powers between elites, economic, while it seems that in these metro cities, the type of tight dominate.
So I'm sure, first of all, I'm sure there are a lot of differences across different work. So we're both working on Stuttgart and New York and Stockholm, and you can imagine those sorts of differences. But I think I don't think so speaking as a retrograde political economist, I don't think we pay anything like enough attention to the power of networks. I mean, this is partially partially Granovetter's strength of weak ties and so on. That's what seems to me to be just really important in a place like London. Now there are all sorts of actual qualifications, but in here, one qualification is about the role of low class or low educated people. Let's take Chicago. In Chicago, there's definitely want to say that the black part of the Democratic Party, or no, the less educated black part of the Democratic Party in Chicago has a pretty clear position within the party. And there are a whole lot of qualifications to the way that works. Very interesting how effective immigrants in South Asian and Southeast Asian immigrants in London, who are a hugely important community, both Indian, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi, just to take the southern continent. They've integrated very effectively. I mean, they're very well networked. They have very strong networks, particularly the Indians, let's say the Pakistanis, and they have taken over big chunks of Labour Party in East London, and but they've gone in and Asians as well. They've gone in a very sort of centre-left direction, because these are people who actually quickly in this system can make their way up the economic ladder. So there are big differences there between the Afro-Caribbeans in Brixton who can't, and all those questions about how do these different groups, but they certainly can integrate into if they've got the self-organization, they can integrate into the party political system. And the party political system is also, I mean, Philippe was implying as well, has also become actually hugely more flexible and fluid, and indeed this can lead to very, very destructive outcomes. But so, I mean, I think there's a huge amount we're going to need to learn more, and particularly me I try to say my background was really in econometric theory, so I've seen the light. I've moved from rational choice into all sorts of other things. Indeed, the hall had a bit of a celebration for Peter the other day, and someone was putting on this very funny thing of saying that I was really Peter came to the Garden of Eden, talk about the rise of capitalism, but actually I was the rational choice snake in the garden, and I stung Peter. So then Peter became rational choice. But then, this becomes too personal, I'm actually married to a very powerful feminist, and she has made it her task for a few years. She thought, in order to make, I'd like him to be able to spend time with my serious friends as well. She'd made her task to, as it were, sort of pull out the Rat-Cho algorithm from me and put in a strong emotions algorithm. So anyway, it's very funny. So that's my small. Okay.
Thank you very much. And I think we also went a bit beyond time schedules. No, it was fine.
Well, I think that was a very important remark he made, and it is kind of the fly in the ointment, so to speak. That is to say, migration is uncontrollable levels of migration are very much with us. In part, they are a product of this damn technology. So you discover you're in the middle of the Sahara, and you can still discover how to get from there to Paris, for goodness sakes. And so the communication system is an important component of this. But how are we going to cope with this at the same time that we have this other center, periphery, and that seems to me to be extremely important, not to forget about migration as a extraneous, not completely extraneous.
It's not
but as
completely
a factor
extraneous.
which-
And what's very interesting, of course, is immigrants are going to come to the metro cities because that's where the jobs are and so on. And of course, if one pushes this one stage further, a large amount of the innovation in the United States
In the
comes
United
from
States, they're
immigrants.
foreigners. The
Absolutely.
Silicon Valley is full
Yeah,
of
yes, yes,
immigrants, very well trained, I might add, immigrants. but
Very,
still.
yeah.
Thank you so much also for the lively debates. Some other Ciampi holders are in the room and they will present in the next weeks. Prisca Duffy, Edgar Grande, and so you're all warmly invited to attend the lectures as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, David.
Thank you very
Also-
much. Yeah, very good.